What happens when passion meets pride, and a split-second decision changes everything. When talented chef Sofia Espinosa walks out on billionaire CEO Hudson Blackwell after years of demands and disrespect, she thinks it's over. But the contract he offers the very next day contains a mysterious clause that neither of them fully understands. One that will force them both to confront their pasts, reshape their futures, and discover that the most important ingredients in life can't be found in any recipe. Sofia Espinosa's alarm blared at 3:30 a.m., same as every weekday for the past 4 years. She didn't hit snooze, not once in all that time. Her job as personal chef to Hudson Blackwell, founder and CEO of Prism Technologies, demanded perfection, and perfection started with punctuality. By 4:15, Sofia had showered, tied her curly black hair into a neat bun, and slipped into the crispy, white chef's coat that hung in her closet alongside 5 identical ones. No wrinkles, no stains. Hudson noticed everything. The drive to his Pacific Heights mansion took 20 minutes in pre-dawn San Francisco. Sofia used this time to mentally review the day's menu. Breakfast: poached eggs with avocado and homemade sourdough toast. Lunch: miso-glazed salmon with forbidden rice. Dinner: a 5-course meal for 8 executives from a Japanese tech firm, Hudson's latest acquisition target. Sofia parked her weathered Honda Civic beside the gleaming line of luxury cars in the private garage. Even after 4 years, the contrast between her life and Hudson's never failed to strike her. She'd grown up in a cramped apartment above her parents' bodega in the Mission District. Hudson had probably never set foot in a corner store in his life. The mansion's kitchen was Sofia's sanctuary, state-of-the-art, spacious, with a view of the bay that visiting chefs drooled over. She started her morning routine with practiced efficiency, brewing Hudson's single-origin Ethiopian coffee, measuring ingredients with surgical precision, and checking her phone for any messages from Diane, Hudson's executive assistant. There was one. Mr. Blackwell requests Spanish-inspired dinner tonight instead of Japanese. Same time, same guests. He's sure you can handle it. The message had been sent at 2 a.m. Sofia's hand tightened around her phone. A complete menu change, hours before an important business dinner. She took a deep breath and started mental calculations. She'd need to send the kitchen assistant to the markets for saffron, Iberico ham, and fresh seafood. The wine pairings would need to be completely reworked. She could do this. She always did. At precisely 7 a.m., Hudson Blackwell entered the kitchen. 6'2", perpetually tan, with the lean physique of someone who paid a small fortune for personal training sessions. He didn't acknowledge Sofia's presence as he sat at the kitchen island, already scanning emails on his tablet. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell," Sofia said, placing his breakfast before him. The poached eggs sat in perfect hemispheres on the artisan. Toast, the avocado sliced with geometric precision. Hudson glanced up, nodded curtly, then returned to his tablet. This was their normal interaction, professional, distant. He'd hired her after trying her food at a charity event, doubling what she'd been making as sous chef at one of the city's most acclaimed restaurants. The job had allowed her to pay off her culinary school debt and send money to her parents, who had retired to Mexico last year. "I've started preparations for the Spanish menu tonight," Sofia said. "I'm thinking of starting with jamón ibérico and manchego, followed by gazpacho, then seafood paella as the main. Perhaps burnt Basque cheesecake for dessert." Hudson looked up with a frown. "Paella? That seems pedestrian for this dinner. These men are expecting to be impressed." Sofia felt a familiar tightening in her chest. "I was thinking of an elevated, version with lobster and saffron aioli. Far from pedestrian. He waved his hand dismissively. Just make sure it's exceptional. This deal could be worth billions. No pressure, Sophia thought. The day progressed in a blur of preparation. Sophia sent Rivera, the kitchen assistant, to several markets for ingredients while she prepared stocks and sauces. By late afternoon, the kitchen was filled with the aromas of saffron, garlic, and seafood. At 5 p.m., Hudson entered the kitchen with Diane and several staff members for a pre-dinner briefing. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the kitchen. "Let me taste the paella," he said. Sophia served him a small plate. Hudson took one bite, then set his fork down. "It's bland. Where's the excitement? These are sophisticated men who've eaten at the world's best restaurants." Sophia felt her face flush. "The dish isn't finished. I'm still—" "Maybe you've lost your touch," Hudson interrupted. "When I hired you, your food had soul. Now it's—" He gestured vaguely. "Adequate." The kitchen fell silent. Diane looked away uncomfortably. Rivera pretended to be deeply focused on chopping parsley. 4 years. 4 years of 16-hour days, of missed family gatherings, of putting Hudson's needs above everything. 4 years of creating meals that guests raved about, while Hudson took the credit for discovering her. 4 years of swallowing her pride when he made last-minute changes or criticized her work in front of others. Something inside Sophia snapped. She set down her knife with careful precision, untied her apron slowly, folded it into a neat square. "What are you doing?" Hudson asked, irritation creeping into his voice. Sophia placed the apron on the counter. "I quit. Don't be dramatic. We have guests arriving in 2 hours." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being final." Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I've given you 4 years of my best work, my best ideas. I've missed my cousin's wedding, my grandmother's funeral, and countless holidays to be here whenever you needed me. And you've never once, not once, treated me with respect." Hudson's face hardened. "This is unprofessional." "No," Sophia said, meeting his gaze directly for perhaps the first time. "Unprofessional is changing an entire menu hours before an important dinner. Unprofessional is criticizing my food in front of your staff. Unprofessional is treating me like I'm disposable." She grabbed her car keys and knife roll, the only things in this kitchen that truly belonged to her. "Sophia, stop this nonsense," Hudson said, his voice holding a note of panic now. "Whatever you want, a raise, more staff, we can discuss it tomorrow." "There is no tomorrow, Mr. Blackwell. Not for us." She walked out of the pristine kitchen, past the shocked faces of the staff, through the grand foyer with its marble floors and crystal chandelier, and out the heavy front door. In her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, Sophia finally let herself shake. What had she done? She had no savings, no backup plan. Her rent was due next week. But as the trembling subsided, she felt something else emerging. Something that felt strangely like freedom. Back in her tiny studio apartment, Sophia opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. She kicked off her shoes and looked around at her humble space, so different from the mansion she'd just left. The realization hit her. She'd just walked away from financial security, from a career-making position. As the night deepened around her, Sophia wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or its most courageous decision. Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through her blinds and a pounding headache. Empty. Wine bottle on the coffee table. Phone buzzing with messages. 15 missed calls. 5 from Rivera, 8 from Diane, and 2 from unknown numbers. No calls from Hudson. She shuffled to her tiny kitchenette, the events of yesterday crashing back. She'd quit. Actually quit. After 4 years of bending her life to Hudson Blackwell's whims, she was unemployed. Sophia brewed strong coffee and checked her bank balance. 2 months of rent and bills, maybe 3 if she was careful. She'd need to find work fast. Her phone buzzed again. Diane. Hello? Sophia answered, voice still rough from sleep. Thank goodness, Diane sighed. Sophia, it was chaos after you left. Hudson tried to salvage dinner with the caterer he keeps on standby, but it was a disaster. The Japanese executives weren't impressed. Sophia felt a flicker of satisfaction, followed quickly by guilt. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Hudson's been impossible. He fired the caterer on the spot. This morning, he's been locked in his office making calls. Diane, I can't come back. You know how he is. I know, just... Diane lowered her voice. Be prepared. Hudson doesn't handle rejection well. After hanging up, Sophia scrolled through. Job listings. None matched her qualifications or paid anywhere near what she'd been making. She'd have to dip into her parents' retirement fund contributions this month. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. Sophia froze. Nobody ever visited her here. She approached cautiously and peeked through the peephole. Hudson Blackwell stood in her hallway, looking strangely out of place. His usual tailored suit was replaced by dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater. His perfect hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. Sophia opened the door but didn't invite him in. Mr. Blackwell, Sophia. His eyes darted past her, taking in her small apartment. May I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. Hudson entered, his tall frame making the studio seem even smaller. He looked around, taking in the cookbook collection that filled an entire wall. The small but well-equipped kitchen, the worn but clean furniture. I didn't realize you lived so. He trailed off. Modestly, Sophia supplied. I was going to say, far from work. He cleared his throat. You've never been late, not once in 4 years. Sophia crossed her arms. What do you want, Mr. Blackwell? He pulled an envelope from his jacket. I want to offer you a new contract. I'm not interested in coming back. This isn't about coming back. It's about moving forward. He held out the envelope. Please, just look at it. Against her better judgment, Sophia took the envelope. Inside was a formal contract, the Prism Technologies logo embossed at the top. She skimmed the terms, her eyes widening. Double her previous salary. Creative control over all menus. Health insurance that included dental and vision. 4 weeks, paid vacation, and something else. A partnership stake in a new venture. A restaurant? She asked, looking up. Hudson nodded. Your restaurant? Well, ours technically, but you'd have complete creative control. Why would you do this? Last night was enlightening. He paced her small living room. The dinner was terrible. The caterer served overcooked fish and store-bought desserts. The executives were polite, but unimpressed. So, this is about saving. Your business deal? No. It's about recognizing value. Hudson stopped pacing. I've taken your talent for granted. You were right about that. Sophia flipped to the last page of the contract. There was an additional clause, one that made no sense. What's this about weekly classes? Hudson's expression changed subtly. That's complicated. Part of a larger project. We can discuss the details later, if you're interested in the offer. Sophia set the contract down. You show up at my apartment with this elaborate proposal, but you're being mysterious about part of it? That's not how partnerships work, Mr. Blackwell. Hudson, he said quietly. If we're going to be partners, you should call me Hudson. Sophia studied him. The man standing in her apartment seemed different from the demanding boss she'd worked for. There was something almost vulnerable in his posture. Let me take you to coffee, he said. Neutral territory. I'll explain everything. And if you're not convinced, I'll leave you alone. Sophia's instincts told her to refuse. This man had made her life difficult for 4 years. But the offer was extraordinary. The kind of opportunity most chefs only dreamed about. 1 coffee, she agreed. No promises. That's fair. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Sophia, I'm sorry about yesterday, and the 4 years before that. The apology caught her off guard. Hudson Blackwell apologizing? She'd never seen it happen before, not to anyone. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of a cafe several blocks from Sophia's apartment. Hudson looked uncomfortable in the casual setting, too polished for the mismatched furniture and chipped mugs. The restaurant would be in North Beach, he explained, adding sugar to his coffee. There's a space available, the old Valentino's building. Great location, good bones. It would need renovation, but nothing major. And you'd fund everything? He nodded. Consider it an investment. Your food with the right platform, it could be extraordinary. What about the cooking classes? What aren't you telling me? Hudson set down his mug. That part is personal. Important to me, but complicated to explain. Sophia leaned back, studying him. I won't sign anything until I understand. Every detail. Would you trust me enough to agree in principle? I promise the classes aren't anything inappropriate or illegal. They're important, Sophia. Maybe the most important part. There was an earnestness in his voice she'd never heard before. This wasn't the demanding CEO she knew. This was someone else entirely. What changed? She asked suddenly. Yesterday you told me I'd lost my touch. Today you want to open a restaurant with me. Why? Hudson looked down at his coffee. Sometimes you don't value something until it's gone. He met her eyes. Your walking out forced me to see what I was losing. Not just an employee, a rare talent, someone irreplaceable. Sophia felt a strange flutter in her chest. Praise from Hudson Blackwell was rarer than snow in San Francisco. One condition, she said finally. We start fresh. Equal partners. No more Mr. Blackwell and the help. Hudson extended his hand across the table. Partners. As Sophia shook his hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much bigger than a business deal. Whatever secrets lay in that final clause, whatever had driven Hudson Blackwell to her door this morning, it would change everything. For better or worse, she was about to find out. Tell me about your vision for the restaurant, Hudson said as they ordered a second round of coffee. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving them alone in their corner of the cafe. Sophia hesitated. She'd dreamed of her own restaurant for years, but had kept those dreams private, tucked away like precious heirlooms. Sharing them with Hudson felt dangerous, as if he might somehow diminish them. It would be different, she began cautiously. Not just another high-end place serving tiny portions on huge plates. Something that honors my roots, but isn't limited by them. Your roots? My parents came from Mexico, but my grandmother was from Spain. I grew up watching them adapt recipes with whatever ingredients they could find or afford. Sophia warmed to the topic despite herself. I want to create food that tells that story. Immigration, adaptation, creativity born from necessity. Tatwait listened intently, his usual impatience nowhere to be seen. What would you call it? Races, Sophia answered without hesitation. It means roots in Spanish. Races, Hudson repeated, his pronunciation surprisingly good. I like it. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Sophia described her menu ideas, traditional dishes reimagined, flavor combinations that honored her heritage while creating something new. Hudson asked thoughtful questions and took notes on his phone. We could open in 4 months if we move quickly on the renovations, he said, showing her photos of the space in North Beach. The previous owners left much of the kitchen equipment. That timeline seems ambitious. I don't do things slowly, Hudson said, then caught himself. But I won't rush you. This needs to be right. Sophia studied him. Why a restaurant? You're a tech CEO. This isn't exactly your world. Hudson set down his phone. My company makes products that connect people virtually. But there's something powerful about people connecting over food that technology can't replicate. He paused. My parents were too busy for family dinners. Business meetings happened at restaurants. Some of my only good childhood memories involve food. This glimpse into his personal life surprised Sophia. In 4 years, Hudson had never mentioned his family. And the final clause? She pressed. The cooking classes? Hudson's expression changed subtly. Once a week, 2 hours. At a location I'll arrange. Teaching what, exactly? To whom? Basic cooking skills. Affordable, nutritious meals. He hesitated. The students are people who need the skills. That's all I can say for now. Sophia frowned. You're asking me to sign a contract with a mysterious obligation, and you won't even tell me what it is? I'm asking you to trust me. Just on this one thing. His gaze was steady. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Sophia felt torn. Every business instinct told her not to sign a contract with hidden terms, but her curiosity was piqued, and the restaurant opportunity was too good to dismiss. If I agree to this, I need something in return, she said finally. Name it. Complete honesty from now on. No more secrets after this. And I need to see the location for these classes before I commit fully. Hudson nodded. That's fair. I can. Take you there this afternoon. Sophia reached for the contract. One more question. The partnership split. 70-30 in my favor. That's unusually generous. It's your expertise that will make this successful, Hudson said simply. I'm just providing capital. Sophia signed her name, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Hudson added his signature, his usually bold scrawl slightly more hesitant than normal. Partners, he said, extending his hand. As they shook hands, Sophia noted the callus on his thumb, something she'd never noticed before. This man had layers she hadn't glimpsed in 4 years of working for him. After leaving the cafe, they drove separately to a neighborhood Sophia rarely visited, a struggling area south of Market Street. Hudson parked his Tesla beside her Honda, looking strangely out of place on the rundown block. This way, he said, leading her toward a plain brick building with a faded sign. Mercer Community Center. Inside, the center was clean, but clearly operating on a tight budget. Mismatched furniture, patched walls, well-worn floors. A large African-American man in his 60s approached them with a smile. Hudson, didn't expect you today. His voice was deep and welcoming. He turned to Sophia with interest. And you must be the chef he's been talking about. Marcus, this is Sophia Espinosa, Hudson said. Sophia, this is Marcus Washington. He runs the center. Pleasure to meet you, Sophia. Marcus's handshake was warm and firm. Hudson says you are going to revolutionize our cooking program. Sophia glanced at Hudson, who looked uncharacteristically awkward. The cooking program. Let me show you the kitchen, Marcus said, gesturing for them to follow. The community center kitchen was basic but functional. Industrial stoves, well-used countertops, aging refrigerators, a far cry from the state-of-the-art kitchen at Hudson's mansion. We serve meals 3 times a week and run various programs, Marcus explained. The cooking classes would be a new addition, teaching young people how to prepare healthy, affordable meals. Young people? Sophia asked. Teenagers mostly, Marcus said. Kids from the neighborhood. Many don't have stable home situations. Teaching them to cook gives them independence, life skills. Sophia turned to Hudson, who was examining a dent in one of the refrigerators with unusual interest. This is the mysterious final clause? Teaching cooking to at-risk teens? Hudson nodded, still not meeting her eyes. Why all the secrecy? This is a good thing. Hudson and Marcus exchanged a look that Sophia couldn't interpret. There's a bit more to it, Marcus said gently. But that's the gist. These kids need skills and stability. Hudson thought you might be the right person to provide. That? Sophia felt confused. Something wasn't adding up, but she couldn't put her finger on what. Why would a tech billionaire care so much about cooking classes at a community center in a struggling neighborhood? I'll need to think about this, she said finally. Of course, Marcus replied. Take all the time you need. Outside, in the harsh afternoon sunlight, Sophia turned to Hudson. There's something you're not telling me. Hudson leaned against his car. Yes, but I promise it's nothing bad. It's just personal. Give me time. Sophia considered his request. The restaurant offer was extraordinary. The cooking classes seemed worthwhile. And this new, more human version of Hudson Blackwell intrigued her despite her better judgment. 1 week, she said. You have 1 week to tell me the whole story. Or I walk. Hudson nodded, relief visible on his face. 1 week, I promise. As they parted ways, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a story much bigger than a restaurant partnership. A story where both she and Hudson might emerge as very different people than they'd been before. The second chance they were giving each other might change more than just their professional lives. It might transform them both in ways neither could yet imagine. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sophia and Hudson toured the restaurant space in North Beach 5 times, each visit sparking new ideas and plans. The former Valentinos had good bones, high ceilings, exposed brick walls, large windows facing the street, but needed significant updates. The kitchen needs complete renovation, Sophia said during their 3rd visit, testing a wobbly prep table. And we'll need to reconfigure the dining room to create better flow. To her surprise, Hudson didn't argue or try to cut corners on costs. Instead, he hired a top restaurant designer who listened carefully to Sophia's vision and transformed it into detailed plans. What do you think? The designer asked, showing them 3D renderings of the space. Sophia studied the images. Warm lighting, tables made from reclaimed wood, colorful tile accents that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen in Mexico. It's perfect, she said, glancing at Hudson. But expensive. Worth every penny, Hudson replied, signing the approval forms. These moments of agreement were becoming more frequent. Sophia found herself looking forward to their meetings, enjoying the creative collaboration that was so different from their previous dynamic. During tastings at her apartment, Hudson offered thoughtful feedback rather than dismissive criticism. He even rolled up his sleeves to help wash dishes, something that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. You're surprisingly good at that, Sophia remarked, watching him dry a wine glass with careful precision. I worked as a dishwasher during high school, Hudson said. Summer job my father insisted on to build character. Sophia nearly dropped the plate she was rinsing. You? A dishwasher? Hudson smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. Hard to believe? I was terrible at first. Broke so many dishes they almost fired me. These glimpses into Hudson's past fascinated Sophia. The privileged CEO had hidden depths she'd never imagined during their years of formal employer-employee interaction. One rainy evening, as they finalized the menu for races, Sophia realized something important had shifted. She was no longer intimidated by Hudson Blackwell. In fact, she was beginning to like him. Thursday arrived, the day of Sophia's first cooking class at the Mercer Community Center. She'd spent hours planning a simple but flavorful recipe, worrying about how to connect with teenagers who might not care about cooking. "You'll be great," Hudson assured her as they parked outside the center. "Just be yourself." "Easy for you to say," Sophia muttered, clutching her bag of supplies. "You're not the one teaching." Inside, Marcus greeted them warmly. "The kids are excited to meet you." "Well, excited about the food anyway." The classroom-turned-kitchen contained 8 cooking stations, each with basic equipment. 10 teenagers lounged in chairs, looking anywhere from bored to openly skeptical. "Everyone, this is Chef Sophia," Marcus announced. "She's going to teach our new cooking program." Sophia surveyed the group. 5 boys, 5 girls, ranging from maybe 13 to 18. Various backgrounds, all wearing expressions that clearly said, "Prove yourself." "Hi, everyone," Sophia began awkwardly. "Today we're making chicken enchiladas with homemade salsa verde." A tall boy in the back rolled his eyes. A girl with brightly colored braids studied her nails. Sophia took a deep breath. "Before we start, I have a question. How many of you are responsible for cooking at home?" Slowly, 7 hands went up. "And how many of you are tired of ramen or mac and cheese?" A few reluctant smiles appeared. "That's why we're here. Not to make fancy food no one actually wants to eat, but to make real food, delicious food, that you can create with affordable ingredients." Sophia demonstrated how to roast tomatillos for the salsa, explaining alternatives if they couldn't find tomatillos in their local stores. As the room filled with enticing aromas, the teenagers began to show interest, asking questions and following instructions. By the end of the 2-hour class, the mood had completely changed. The students proudly sampled their creations, several asking if they could take leftovers home. "Next week, we'll make something else you can cook for yourselves or your families," Sophia promised. "Something that will impress people, but won't break the bank." As the teenagers filed out, several thanked her, some shyly, others with newfound respect. "That was amazing," Marcus said after they'd gone. "You connected with them immediately." Sophia felt a warm glow of satisfaction. "They're good kids." "Yes, they are." Marcus glanced toward his office, where Hudson was making phone calls. "They've had tough breaks, that's all." Sophia began packing up her supplies. "Hudson still hasn't explained why this program is so important to him." Marcus studied her for a moment. "That's his story to tell. But I will say this. He's been supporting this center for years, anonymously, until recently. Why? We helped someone he cared about once." Marcus paused. "Hudson Blackwell isn't exactly who you think he is." On the drive back to the restaurant site for a late meeting with the contractors, Sophia found herself stealing glances at Hudson. He seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, humming along to the radio, one hand casually draped over the steering wheel. "The class went well," he said, catching her look. "It did. The kids were great once they warmed up." "Marcus thinks you're a natural teacher," Sophia smiled. "I enjoyed it more than I expected." But Hudson, you still want to know why it matters. To me. Yes, Hudson's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. Soon, I promise. At the restaurant site, they discussed timeline adjustments with the construction manager. The opening was now scheduled for exactly 2 months away. We need to start hiring staff next week, Sophia said, as they walked through the half-finished space. Sous chef, line cooks, waitstaff. Hudson nodded. You'll make the final decisions, of course. Of course, Sophia echoed, still getting used to this new dynamic where her opinion actually mattered. As they stood in what would become the dining room, surrounded by construction dust and potential, Sophia felt a strange sense of belonging. This restaurant, this partnership, was becoming more than just a job. It was becoming a purpose. We're really doing this, she said softly. Hudson turned to her, his expression uncharacteristically open. Yes, we really are. In that moment, standing amid the chaos of creation, Sophia realized something fundamental had changed. The angry chef who had stormed out of Hudson Blackwell's mansion was gone. So was the demanding perfectionist boss. In their place stood 2 people building something together, something that might just transform them both. 3 weeks into her new partnership with Hudson, Sophia settled into a rhythm. Mornings at the UTU restaurant site overseeing construction. Afternoons developing recipes in her apartment, which Hudson had equipped with professional-grade appliances on loan until the restaurant was ready. Thursday evenings teaching at the community center. Cooking classes had become the highlight of her week. The teenagers, initially skeptical, now arrived early, eager to learn. Sophia taught them more than recipes. She shared techniques, substitutions for expensive ingredients, ways to stretch meals on tight budgets. My mom couldn't believe I made that chicken myself, reported Jamal, a quiet 15-year-old who rarely spoke but never missed a class. My little sisters actually ate vegetables, said Tasha, whose brightly colored braids changed weekly. They didn't even notice they were eating something healthy. Sophia beamed with pride. That's exactly the point. Good food doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. After class, she joined Hudson and Marcus in the office to discuss expanding the program. We could add a second weekly class, Sophia suggested. Maybe focus on meal planning, shopping on a budget. If we had more equipment, Marcus said, we could accommodate more students. Hudson nodded, making notes on his tablet. Make a list of what you need. I'll take care of it. As Marcus outlined the center's needs, Sophia noticed a framed photograph on his desk she hadn't seen before. A group of teenage boys in basketball uniforms, arms slung around each other's shoulders. Your team? She asked. Marcus smiled. Class of 2007. Good kids. He picked up the frame. This one played college ball. This one's a doctor now. This one... His voice softened. Didn't make it. Hudson, who had been scrolling through emails, suddenly looked up. We should go. Contractor meeting in 30 minutes. His abrupt tone, reminiscent of the old Hudson, caught Sophia off guard. As they walked to the car, she sensed his withdrawal, the easy rapport of recent weeks replaced by tense silence. Everything okay? She ventured as they drove. Fine. His one-word answer closed the door on conversation. The meeting with contractors ran long. By the time they finished, it was past 8, and Sophia was starving. Want to grab dinner? She asked, as they left the construction site. I know a great taqueria nearby. Hudson hesitated, then nodded. Lead the way. At Taqueria Sanchez, a tiny family-owned place with faded decorations and the best tacos in North Beach, Hudson seemed out of place in his expensive clothes. But he relaxed as they ate. the tension from earlier gradually easing. "This is incredible," he admitted, finishing his second carnitas taco. "How did you find this place?" "I lived around the corner when I first moved to San Francisco. Single room, shared bathroom, all I could afford while attending culinary school." Hudson looked around with new appreciation. "Sometimes the best food comes from the most unassuming places. That's part of what I want to capture at races," Sophia said, warming to the subject. "Food with history, with soul, not pretentious or exclusionary, like the cooking classes," Hudson said quietly. Sophia saw an opening. "Yes, exactly like that. Hudson, it's been almost a month. You promised to explain why those classes matter so much to you." He set down his taco, appetite apparently gone. For a long moment, he stared at his plate, and Sophia thought he might deflect again. But then he spoke, his voice low. "I had a younger brother, Ethan." Hudson's eyes remained fixed on the table. "He was always different from me. Struggled in school, got in with a rough crowd. My parents were demanding, perfectionists." Sophia listened, barely breathing. "When Ethan was 16, he got arrested for shoplifting. My parents sent him to a military-style boarding school instead of dealing with the real issues." Hudson's jaw tightened. He ran away 3 months later. Ended up at Mercer Center. Marcus took him in, gave him structure, stability. "That's why you support the center," Sophia said softly. Hudson nodded. For almost a year, Ethan did well. Got his GED, started community college. He took a shaky breath. Then he relapsed. Overdose. He was 19. "Hudson, I'm so sorry." "The thing is, during that good year, he learned to cook. Basic stuff, but he was proud of it. Called me once to brag about a lasagna he'd made." Hudson finally looked up, his eyes haunted. "I was too busy to talk. Had a meeting, told him I'd call back later." "You couldn't have known," Sophia said gently. "No, but I could have been a better brother." Hudson's voice hardened. "My parents never even mentioned his name after the funeral. Acted like he never existed. But I can't forget. And I can't help thinking that if he'd had more support, more skills, more confidence." Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand. "The cooking program is for kids like Ethan. Yes. Marcus has been asking for years to add a cooking component to their life skills training. When you quit, something clicked. You're exactly who those kids need." The pieces finally fit together. Hudson's mysterious clause, his support of the center, his insistence on Sophia's involvement, all connected to the brother he couldn't save. "Why not just tell me this from the beginning?" Sophia asked. "I don't talk about Ethan to anyone." Hudson withdrew his hand. "My board of directors, my executive team, none of them know I had a brother. It's easier that way." Sophia understood isolation all too well. After her grandmother died, she'd thrown herself into work, avoiding the pain by staying busy. Hudson had built an empire, perhaps for the same reason. "The restaurant location," Sophia said suddenly. "You turned down other properties. Were you looking specifically for North Beach?" Hudson nodded. "Ethan loved this neighborhood. Used to talk about opening a cafe here someday." The revelation landed like a physical weight. Races wasn't just a business venture, or even a chance for Sophia to showcase her talent. It was Hudson's way of honoring his brother's memory. "I understand now," she said. "Are you angry I didn't tell you sooner?" Sophia considered the question. A month ago, she would have been furious at the manipulation, the secrecy. But now, seeing the pain behind Hudson's carefully constructed facade, she felt something closer. to compassion. No, she answered honestly. Some truths take time. As they left the taqueria, the night air cool against their faces, Sophia sensed another shift in their evolving relationship. Hudson had trusted her with his most closely guarded secret. In return, she felt walls of her own beginning to crumble. "My first cooking class is next Thursday," Hudson said as they reached his car. "For the center's staff." Sophia stopped short. "Your cooking class?" "Marcus thought it would be good for me to get involved beyond writing checks." Hudson looked embarrassed. "I asked him not to tell you. I've been taking private lessons for weeks." The image of Hudson Blackwell, tech billionaire, awkwardly chopping vegetables alongside social workers, made Sophia smile. "Need a teacher's assistant?" she offered. "God, yes," he admitted with visible relief. "I still can't dice an onion properly." Sophia laughed, a genuine laugh that dispelled the heaviness of earlier revelations. "Don't worry. Some skills take time to develop." As they drove back toward her apartment, Sophia realized she was seeing Hudson, truly seeing him for the first time. Not as her demanding boss or even as her business partner, but as a person carrying hidden wounds, trying in his imperfect way to heal them. The restaurant they were building, the classes they were teaching, these weren't just professional projects. They were pathways to redemption for both of them. The final weeks before races opened passed in a blur of activity. Sophia hired staff, finalized menus, and supervised kitchen installations, while Hudson handled permits, marketing, and finances. They worked in surprising harmony, their complementary skills creating a smooth operation. Sophia's apartment became command central, its small dining table covered with sample menus, staff schedules, and vendor contracts. Hudson dropped by most evenings, usually bringing takeout from restaurants they were scouting for ideas. "The sous chef you hired, Diego, he's fantastic," Hudson said one night as they reviewed wine pairings. "His plating is almost as good as yours," Sophia smiled at the near compliment. "He worked at Quince for 3 years. We're lucky to get him." "We're lucky to have you," Hudson said, his voice unusually soft. Their eyes met briefly before Sophia looked away, suddenly flustered. These moments had been happening more frequently. A lingering glance, a casual touch, a shared laugh that felt more intimate than professional. "The reservation list for opening night is full," she said, changing the subject. "Plus a waiting list, 50 names long." "Your former colleagues are curious," Hudson replied. "Half the high-end restaurant industry in San Francisco wants to see what you've created." "What we've created," Sophia corrected. The night before the opening, Sophia couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, second-guessing every decision, imagining all possible disasters. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Hudson. "Can't sleep either?" She smiled despite her nerves. "Busy catastrophizing." "Same. Want company?" 30 minutes later, they sat on her tiny balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the city lights. "What if no one comes back after opening night?" Sophia voiced her deepest fear. "What if they hate my food?" "Impossible," Hudson said firmly. "Your food tells a story people want to hear. It's authentic in a way most restaurants aren't." His confidence steadied her. This new Hudson, supportive, genuine, vulnerable, still surprised her daily. "Even if it all goes wrong," he continued, "we've already succeeded where it matters most." "The cooking program?" Hudson nodded. "Jamal's mother called Marcus yesterday. Said her son is talking about culinary school now. Tasha is cooking dinner for her siblings 3 nights a week." Warmth spread through Sophia's chest that had nothing to do with the wine. "That means everything. As dawn broke over the city, Hudson stood to leave. At her door, he paused. "Whatever happens tonight, I'm proud of what we've built, Sophia." The simple words meant more than any elaborate praise. Opening night arrived with perfect San Francisco weather, clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of the bay. Sophia arrived at Raíces 6 hours early, her chef's coat crisp and new, embroidered with the restaurant's logo, a tree with roots showing beneath. The kitchen hummed with controlled chaos as her team prepared for service. Sophia moved from station to station, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, offering guidance. Hudson arrived 4 hours before opening, dressed impeccably, but immediately rolling up his sleeves to help wherever needed. Sophia watched with amusement as he carefully arranged flowers on each table, positioning them with the same intensity he probably brought to billion-dollar business deals. At 5:30, front-of-house staff gathered for final instructions. At 5:45, Sophia addressed her kitchen team. "Tonight, we tell our story through food," she said simply. "My story, Hudson's story, your stories. Let's make it unforgettable." At precisely 6 p.m., the doors opened. The dining room filled quickly with critics, industry insiders, and San Francisco elite. Sophia spotted her former executive chef from Quince, several well-known food bloggers, and the restaurant critic from The Chronicle. For the first hour, everything proceeded flawlessly. The kitchen operated with military precision. Diners exclaimed over the roasted poblano soup with lime crema, the heirloom tomato salad with pickled cactus, the duck carnitas with mole negro. Then disaster struck. "Chef," Diego called urgently. "The shipment of Iberico ham for the main course special. It's spoiled." Sophia rushed to inspect the meat that had been delivered that afternoon. The smell confirmed Diego's assessment. 38 orders already in, he said, panic edging his voice. "What do we do?" Sophia's mind raced through alternatives. The special, Iberico ham with fig glaze, her grandmother's recipe reinvented, was the centerpiece of the opening menu. The critic from The Chronicle had ordered it. "Chef?" Diego pressed. Hudson appeared beside her, having overheard the commotion. "Problem?" Sophia explained quickly. "We have nothing comparable to substitute." To her surprise, Hudson didn't panic or blame. Instead, he looked thoughtful. "What about the prosciutto we were saving for tomorrow's staff meal? Could we adapt the recipe?" "It's not the same quality, but..." Sophia considered. "If we adjust the cooking time and change the glaze, maybe add smoked salt to deepen the flavor." "Let me help," Hudson said, already removing his jacket. Sophia blinked. "You?" "I've been practicing that knife technique you showed me. Put me to work." For the next 20 minutes, Hudson stood beside Sophia at the prep station, following her instructions with careful precision. Together, they reworked the dish completely, a hybrid creation born of necessity. When the revised special went out, Sophia held her breath. Long minutes passed before Hudson, monitoring the dining room, returned with news. The Chronicle critic just cleaned his plate, asked to compliment the chef on the innovative flavor profile. Relief flooded through Sophia. "Really? Really?" He called it bold and honest, like the chef herself. As service continued, the kitchen found its rhythm again. Sophia moved between stations, guiding, tasting, perfecting. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of Hudson in the dining room, greeting guests with genuine warmth rather than practiced charm. By midnight, the last diners had departed, leaving behind empty plates and generous praise. Staff gathered for a celebratory toast, exhausted but exhilarated. "To Chef Sophia," Hudson said, raising his glass. who makes magic from disaster. And to Hudson, Sophia countered, who's surprisingly handy with a knife when it counts. Laughter and applause filled the restaurant. As staff dispersed to finish closing duties, Hudson drew Sophia aside. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a legal document, an amendment to their partnership agreement. "I don't understand," Sophia said, scanning the text. "This gives me majority ownership of races. You earned it tonight. This is your vision, your talent." Hudson's expression was earnest. "I'm just lucky to be part of it." Sophia stared at the eager document, then at Hudson. "Why are you really doing this?" For a moment, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes, something beyond friendship or professional respect. But before he could answer, Diego called from the kitchen with a question about tomorrow's prep list. The moment passed, leaving Sophia with the document in her hands and a growing certainty that there was still more to Hudson Blackwell's story than he had revealed. 2 months after opening night, Races had become the most talked-about restaurant in San Francisco. Reservations were booked solid 3 months in advance. The Chronicle had awarded them 4 stars. Even Sophia's former boss from Quince had come in twice, leaving generous tips and grudging compliments. Success brought new challenges. Sophia worked 14-hour days, perfecting dishes, training staff, handling the sudden media attention. Hudson appeared almost daily, sometimes just to taste new menu items, other times to help with business decisions. Their Thursday cooking classes at the community center remained sacred, the one commitment Sophia refused to compromise regardless of the restaurant's demands. The program had expanded to 3 weekly classes with a waiting list of eager participants. "Chef." "Sophia!" Tasha called as Sophia arrived for the advanced class. "I got accepted to the culinary program at City College." Sophia hugged the teenager, genuine pride washing through her. "That's incredible. When do you start?" "September. And Mr. Blackwell said he might have a part-time position for me at Races." Sophia made a mental note to thank Hudson for this gesture. His quiet generosity continued to surprise her. Today's class focused on knife skills, a fundamental lesson Sophia took seriously. She demonstrated proper technique, then moved among the students, offering guidance and encouragement. "Where's Delia?" she asked, noticing an empty station. Delia Torres, a 17-year-old with extraordinary natural talent, had quickly become Sophia's most promising student. Marcus frowned. "She hasn't been in for 2 weeks, not answering calls either." "That's not like her," Sophia said, concerned. Delia had never missed a class, often arriving early to help set up. "I've been meaning to check on her, but things have been hectic here," Marcus admitted. "Her home situation is complicated." After class, Sophia found Hudson waiting in Marcus's office. "How was class?" he asked. "Good, but I'm worried about Delia. She's missed 2 weeks." Hudson's expression shifted from relaxed to concerned. "The girl who recreated your mole sauce from memory?" Sophia nodded, touched that he remembered this detail. "Let's check on her," Hudson said decisively, standing. "I have her address from the program registration." 30 minutes later, they stood outside a rundown apartment building in the Mission District. Delia's unit was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a dimly lit hallway. Sophia knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder. Finally, the door opened a crack. Delia peered out, her expression changing from wariness to surprise. "Chef Sophia? Mr. Blackwell? What are you doing here?" "Checking on our star student," Sophia said gently. "We've missed you at class." Delia's eyes darted nervously behind her. "This isn't a good time." Sophia noticed the girl's oversized sweatshirt, the dark circles under her eyes. "Is everything okay?" "Delia!" After a moment's hesitation, Delia opened the door wider. The apartment was clean but sparse. Minimal furniture, bare walls. A pile of textbooks sat on the coffee table beside an open laptop. "My mom went to rehab," Delia said, her voice flat. "Again? She said it would be different this time, but—" She shrugged, the gesture too world-weary for a 17-year-old. "You've been here alone?" Hudson asked, his voice carefully neutral. Delia nodded. "It's fine. I'm used to it. But I ran out of money for the bus, so I couldn't come to class." Sophia and Hudson exchanged a look, a silent communication honed through months of partnership. "Have you eaten today?" Sophia asked. "I had some ramen." Delia's attempt at nonchalance failed as her stomach audibly growled. "Pack a bag," Hudson said, suddenly. "Clothes, schoolwork, whatever you need for a few days." Delia looked confused. "Why?" "You're staying at Sophia's until we figure this out," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "If that's okay with both of you." Sophia nodded immediately. "My couch is comfortable, and my fridge is always full." Delia's eyes filled with tears she clearly didn't want them to see. "I can't—" "You can," Hudson interrupted softly. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Delia." Something in his voice, a hint of old pain, seemed to reach the girl. She wiped her eyes quickly and nodded. "Give me 5 minutes to pack." While Delia gathered her things, Hudson made phone calls to Marcus, to a social worker he apparently knew, to his lawyer. Sophia watched him, struck by the efficiency with which he mobilized resources, the lack of hesitation in helping a teenager he barely knew. When Delia was settled at Sophia's apartment with a proper meal and homework spread across the coffee table, Hudson and Sophia stepped onto the balcony to talk. "Thank you," Sophia said, "for everything you did today." Hudson leaned against the railing, gazing out at the city lights. No one helped Ethan when he needed it. Not really. Not enough. The simple statement revealed volumes. Sophia waited, sensing he had more to say. "I was at Harvard when things got bad for him," Hudson continued. "Too busy becoming the success my parents expected. Too concerned with my own life to see he was drowning." "You were young yourself," Sophia said gently, "old enough to know better." Hudson turned to face her. "The night he died, I was celebrating a business school award. My parents didn't even call to tell me until the next day. Said they didn't want to disrupt my important evening." Sophia reached for his hand, holding it between both of hers. "That's why you care so much about the center, about kids like Delia." Hudson nodded, his fingers tightening around hers. "I can't save Ethan, but maybe I can help others like him." In that moment, standing close in the cool night air, the final walls between them crumbled. Sophia saw clearly the man behind the billionaire facade, wounded, genuine, trying in his imperfect way to make amends for a past he couldn't change. And Hudson, looking into her eyes, seemed to find something he'd been searching for without knowing it. 6 months after Races opened its doors, the restaurant had become a San Francisco institution. Celebrities requested private dinners. Food magazines featured Sophia's innovative dishes. A prestigious James Beard nomination seemed likely. For Sophia, success brought unexpected challenges. Competitors tried to poach her staff. Investors offered to fund expansion to other cities. Through it all, Hudson remained a steady presence, handling business pressures so Sophia could focus on the creative side. The cooking program at Mercer Center had flourished as well. 3 of Sophia's students had secured culinary school scholarships. Delia, now living with a vetted foster family Hudson had connections with, was thriving as a weekend prep cook at Races. One Wednesday morning, Sophia arrived at the restaurant, unusually early to test a new dessert recipe. The kitchen lights were already on. Strange, since prep staff wouldn't arrive for hours. She pushed through the swinging doors to find Hudson standing at her station, focused intently on dicing an onion with painstaking precision. "Hudson," she called, startled. He looked up, caught red-handed. "You're early. So are you. And you're..." Sophia gestured at his setup, cutting board, knife, ingredients neatly arranged. "What exactly are you doing?" Hudson ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Practicing." "Practicing what?" "Your abuela's mole recipe, the one from the opening night menu." Sophia moved closer, inspecting his work. The onions were diced with surprising skill, not chef level, but competent. Nearby sat toasted chilies, sesame, seeds, and all the complex ingredients that went into her grandmother's signature sauce. "Why?" she asked softly. Hudson took a deep breath. "I've been taking cooking lessons, private ones, twice a week for the past 3 months." "From whom?" "Diego, mostly. Sometimes your pastry chef, Luisa." He looked down at his hands. They swore to secrecy. Sophia felt oddly betrayed, though she couldn't articulate why. "All this time? Why the secret?" Hudson wiped his hands on a towel. "Remember the mysterious final clause in our contract? The one I couldn't explain at first?" Sophia nodded slowly. "It's time to explain it fully." Hudson gestured to a stool. "Please, sit." Sophia perched on the stool, watching as Hudson gathered his thoughts. "The community center program was only part of it," he began. "I had a bigger vision, something that would make a real difference. A culinary school that offers full scholarships to kids who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity. Like our students at Mercer? Exactly like them. Young people with talent and drive, but no resources." Hudson's eyes lit with passion. "I've been working with Marcus to secure a building near the center. The plans are drawn up. Funding is in place." Sophia felt a surge of excitement. "Hudson, that's incredible. I want you to run it," he said simply. The request stunned her. "Me? But the restaurant? You'd still be involved with Races. But this school would be your legacy, Sophia. Changing lives through food, just like you've already started doing." Sophia's mind raced with possibilities. Teaching had awakened something. In her, a satisfaction different from the adrenaline of restaurant service. "Why learn to cook yourself?" she asked, still puzzled by his morning activities. Hudson smiled sheepishly. "How could I fund a cooking school if I can't even make a basic sauce?" I needed to understand what I was supporting. The image of billionaire Hudson Blackwell struggling through basic cooking lessons made Sophia laugh, a warm, genuine sound that echoed through the empty kitchen. "It's not that funny," he protested, though he was smiling too. "It kind of is." Sophia stood and moved to his side. "Your technique isn't bad, actually, but you're holding the knife too tightly." She placed her hand over his, adjusting his grip. The simple contact sent a current between them, something neither could ignore any longer. "Sophia," Hudson said quietly, "the school isn't the only reason I wanted to learn to cook." "No? I wanted to understand your world, to be part of it, not just fund it from a distance." His voice dropped lower. "To be worthy of a chef who was brave enough to walk away from everything rather than compromise her standards." Sophia met his gaze. "Is that what you admire? My stubbornness?" "I admire your integrity, your passion, Your way of connecting with people through food? He paused, a vulnerability in his eyes she'd never seen before. These past months, you've taught me more than cooking techniques. 6 months ago, this moment would have seemed impossible. The demanding CEO and his rebellious chef, standing together in a shared kitchen, building something neither had imagined possible. Sophia picked up a spoon and dipped it into the sauce Hudson had been working on. She tasted it thoughtfully. "It needs more cinnamon," she said. "And your story needs more explanation. Why didn't you just tell me about the school from the beginning?" Hudson leaned against the counter. "I was afraid you'd think it was just a rich man's vanity project. I needed you to see the kids first, to understand why it matters. And now? Now I know you see what I see. Potential that just needs the right opportunity." Sophia considered his words, the journey they'd taken from that explosive argument in his mansion kitchen to this moment of quiet understanding. "I'll do it," she said finally. "But we designed the program together. Equal partners, remember?" Hudson's face lit with a smile. Not the practiced charm he showed the world, but something real and rare. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "The original contract," he explained, handing it to her. "Look at the margin of the final page." Sophia unfolded it carefully. There, in Hudson's neat handwriting, was a note dated the night she had quit. "Find a way to keep her. She's the only person brave enough to tell me the truth." "You planned this from the beginning?" Sophia asked, stunned. "Not this exactly. But I knew letting you walk away would be the biggest mistake of my life." As morning light filled the kitchen, their kitchen, Sophia realized the argument that had led to her quitting had actually been the first step towards something extraordinary. Hudson's unexpected offer the next day hadn't just changed their professional lives. It had set them both on a path to healing, to purpose, to connection. The final clause had never really been about cooking classes or even a culinary school. It had always been about second chances. For Hudson, for Sophia, and for all the young people whose lives they would touch together. That was the end of this story. Where are you listening from? If you enjoyed this tale of redemption and new beginnings, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more engaging stories like this one. Share with your friends and family to spread kindness and awareness. Every share helps our community grow and allows these messages of second chances and transformation to reach more people who might need to hear them.